Okay, so welcome to Mishkanot Sha'ananim. The shir this week is taking place in Mishkanot Sha'ananim in the Convention Center. We're continuing the discussion regarding special leniencies that allow requesting melachot to be done by goyim. In the previous shir, we learned that according to the Rambam, and this is also taken in the Halacha, the Shulchan Aruch, requesting melacha to be done to help someone who's ill is allowed, and also requesting a drabanan melacha, drabanan level prohibition, is allowed for someone who has tsar. We learned that from the Gemara in Eruvin about the child for whom it was allowed to request hot water to be brought through a drabanan Yisur of Tiltul. From here, the Rambam learned that you're allowed to request also not only for actual sickness, but for mitzta'il the katan, for someone who's in discomfort. We're going to have to try to define what extent of discomfort qualifies and justifies such a request. That's what we're going to try to do now briefly. We'll see on page 11 of the English pages, which, as we've said, since the page where we're in unit 4, shir number 4, page 11, as we've said last time, these pages might change somewhat. They'll be updated, so this might end up being shir 12 if you're watching this. First example, the question of heat. This is this Rishonim have already identified the need of heat. Do you have it on page 11 in the English pages? You got it? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't get the page. Like that. So the Mordechai brings the story. The Mordechai at the top of page 11 brings the story. רבנו יום טוב כתב, מנעורי הייתי משתומם על האוסרים להתחמם כנגד מדורות הנוכרים, הנעשה בשבת בשביל ישראל. He was very surprised and astonished that anyone thought that there's any problem with using the heat of the fireplaces that were heated by the goyim, even if they were done for the Jews. So he was surprised that anyone could assume there is such a prohibition, there's any problem with that. The assumption here is that being cold is a kind of discomfort that can also lead to illness, as we know. And therefore, it's very obvious to him that this would fit into the category of the mitzvah, just like a mitzvah of a katan. I'll remind us, when we talk about the katan there, it seems that there was water at home, there just was no hot water. So requesting the goy to bring hot water for the katan, that was okay. Right? So heat should be the first example that should work, that should be justifiable. That's why I said it's very surprising to him that anyone thought it's a problem. Sorry? Right, so that's an interesting point. Right here, for the sake of heat, right, he's justifying doing Isur D'Oraisa. That's right. Now why? Because in this context, Hakol Cholim Etzel Tzina, so as Yaakov is correctly pointing out, the issue here is, right, there are two questions that we need to ask. One is, when you say chole, what is chole? And the other is, if it's not chole, so maybe it's mitzter. Here we see that the leniency extended beyond the tsar and to chole. Right?
This is not mitzvah, this would be...
This is right. This is to the extent of chol Hashem b'sakana. B'chor, that was the argument there, because Rabbeinu Yom Tov was surprised that anyone said that this is prohibited, which means that the Rishonim who said it was prohibited, right? So we learned two things from here. First of all, that according to most Rishonim, getting cold is considered illness, actual illness. The second thing that the Chora we can learn from here is even those who would say that the Choli is not actual illness should still agree that it's at least a level of discomfort that would justify Melacha D'Rabbanan. Right? Right? In other words, it would be hard to say that some Rishonim say it's Melacha illness that justifies requesting Melacha D'Oraisa, and other Rishonim disagree and say, no, it's nothing. It's not even a discomfort to the extent that the Rambam was talking about, right? So once again, the Rambam is talking about a katan who doesn't necessarily have to be washed. And we say, yeah, but he's in discomfort, it's better to wash him. If you're going to wash him, you should bring hot water. What about if it's actually cold? So most Rishonim say, if it's actually cold, this is something that leads to illness, and therefore you can even use a Melacha D'oraisa that was done for them. Right? The Shulchan Aruch, they will hold this. Shulchan Aruch in the next seif says, in the seif brought here, the Reish Ayin Vav Hey, says, Ba'atzot korot mutar l'goy la'asot medura b'shvil ha'ktanim, u'mutarim g'dolim l'itchamem bo. Ve'afilu b'shvil ha'gdolim mutar l'makor gadol. So that's why the Shulchan Aruch, since we're talking about a Melacha D'oraisa, the Shulchan Aruch goes through different, tries to create a gradation here. Right? And it says like this. If it's cold, so we're concerned about the children's health. Now, if the guy does it for the children's health, Yisrael can also use it. This brings us back to shiur number 3, right? We discussed there what is done on the Jew's behalf. Shiur number 2. What is done on the Jew's behalf? Right? There was the case with the ramp that we said if the guy erected the ramp for his own use, so then Yisrael can also use it since it was done not in the context of the prohibition. Right? It was done for the guy did it for himself. So Rabban Gamliel can also use it, right? Any Jew can use it as well. That was the case there. We see if, as long as the Melacha was not done for those for whom it would be right. It would be usher to request the Melacha to be done for me. But if I tell him I have a baby who will get cold, can you turn the heat on? That's okay. He turned it on for the baby, and that was okay. Mimela, I can also enjoy it myself. Right? Just a moment. But if it's, we have the rabbi from Canada who's going to say by us it could be very cold, and then everyone's in danger. And if everyone's in danger, Mimela, you can also request that. That's already a level of actual illness. That's the equivalent of actual illness, and therefore you can request the Melacha for a Gadol as well.
And we're not even talking, if I understand this, asking the remez in kind of a...
Right.
We're asking directly.
Right. That's an important point. As we said, this isn't within the framework of things that are not within the prohibition. These are things that are included in the prohibition. But there's a leniency, right? In other words, by the definition of the prohibition, this should be asur. But since there's leniency for the sake of illness, Mimela, you're also allowed to request it directly, right? That's what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. It's a good point. In the Mordechai, this isn't mentioned, right? In the Mordechai, what it says is that the Prushim, there's those who are more frum, and then he goes on to say, well, my father was plenty frum, and he was lenient, but those who were, he said, those who were more frum, right? The Prushim, they wouldn't use the fire that was lit by the goyim, regardless of whether it was requested or not, right? Again, as we know, it doesn't matter if if it's done for the Jew, the question of whether it was requested directly or not doesn't change that, right? Isn't relevant. So we see in the Shulchan Aruch this gradation that allows the leniency, again, for an Isur D'oraisa, that's the equivalent of an illness on different levels, right? Let's say the Aruch HaShulchan tries to clarify the gradation a bit more clearly. במדינות צפוניות שהכל גדול בימות החורף, הדבר פשוט שהכל חולים אצל צינה גדולה כזו. במדינות צפוניות, we mentioned you, okay?
Russia was cold too.
Russia was cold too. Yeah. A few other northern countries that are cold. So he says here clearly, clearly anyone would be considered sick in that context, and therefore you can request anything you need. Now, I'm skipping to the 4th line. אמנם אם אין הכל גדול בשם, או שביום הזה אין הכל גדול, ודאי אסור לומר לגוי להסיק את הנאום, ואפילו עשה הגוי מדעתו צריך למחות. כשיש קטנים בבית, מותר לומר לגוי להסיק את הנאום. Right? The main point here is, this is basically repeating what the Shulchan Aruch said, the main point here is the awareness. And when you say it's cold, right? My wife always asks me every morning, is it cold out? And I say, I don't know. right? Because I don't feel cold, but I don't know if that answers your question, right? So when you say it's cold, you say, okay, define what you mean by cold. Presumably cold would mean cold to the extent that a mother would be worried about her child's health, right? That's cold enough to justify requesting the guy to turn the heat on for the children, right? So again, there's cold and there's cold, right? There's Israel cold and there's Russia cold, right? It's not quite the same, yes.
Well, but it's subjective, and that's clearly very important, and it could differentiate between people who thrive in cooler temperatures and people who like it to be warmer. So there's a lot of subjectivity here.
Right, so here I wonder, because in a moment we're going to get to air conditioning.
Last words of Aruch HaShulchan said that last time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Last words of Aruch HaShulchan, v'lo kol ha'anashim shavim b'zeh.
Right, that's kasher lachliya. Let's read the whole paragraph there. kasher lachliya matay nikra kol gadol umatay nikra ino gadol v'midonten derechei tevet yashad kol gadol meod אי אפשר לגדול בזה גדר ברור ולא כל האנשים שווים בזה. So he isn't saying when it goes under 7 degrees that's where everyone would be considered. When it goes under 14 degrees, so children would be in danger. He says it's not that measurable, which is actually which I actually find surprising. I'll tell you why. Do different people, well, we have 2 doctors here so they can tell us, do different people get sick at different temperatures? Are the chances of getting sick different for different people?
I would say that.
Presumably yes, right?
But it's not, sickness isn't a matter of temperature, it's a matter of viruses.
Right. The assumption here is that when we say, again, since we're talking about Isur Deraisa, the issue at hand is not a Melacha Drabanan. It's not a Drabananly, rabbinically prohibited Isur that you can request for the sake of someone who's in discomfort. We're talking about an Isur Deraisa. It has to be something that's parallel to illness. How bad does it have to be parallel to illness?
You're saying illness isn't subjective?
Well, presumably there's a temperature which, doctors would say, this is dangerously cold. You can't stay at this temperature.
That's nothing like what the temperatures we're talking about here.
No, not dangerously. Not dangerous. Okay, when you're talking dangerously close
Dangerous to go outside of
Syria,
Chicago.
No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about.
I mean,
Again, what we're talking about, if you stay in the state, the chances of illness are great, right?
Probably depends on how long you are in this course.
Well, the assumption is you're stuck.
I mean, you have to.
We define that also because if we're talking about a situation where, I don't know, back in the day, if you would get sick, like you catch a cold, that could be really dangerous. That's different than today. That if you
Well, it's still dangerous.
get a
I
virus.
just came from the hospital and somebody has pneumonia because the child was in a cold room. And they didn't have
So
enough heat,
nowadays, if you have pneumonia, it's not going to.
It's
Right, although-
it's only not life. It's not life threatening because we have drugs, but it's still life threatening.
Right, but that is an interesting point. I don't know. It's a good point. It used to be if you got pneumonia, so
You were dead.
good luck to you. But nowadays,
Presumably that would
to
justify.
take care of yourself, but pneumonia for between the ages of a young child till whatever is not considered life-threatening unto itself at least, right? On the other hand, obviously you could do anything when someone has pneumonia. Obviously, you could ask the guy to do whatever, right? That's clear. But here, l'chorah, the issue is not that, right? The issue is the question. It's not so clear to me. I'm not sure what the answer is. I think most poskim tend to be lenient on this, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what what I think. There's presumably it's not enough to say that we're talking about discomfort here, right? We have to say there's something that's parallel to illness. Is that because great discomfort is parallel to illness? Is that what this means? Or does it mean illness, even choli she'en bo sakana, is still illness? There's still some level of danger within that, and that's why you can request anything from the go, right? If that's the case, if we say parallel to illness, in what sense?
Well, it says
As bad as a bad headache? Does it have to be cold
Your opening lines.
like a bad headache, or cold that will make me sick?
Your opening
Right?
lines
That's an important question as far as it right in the sense that Yaakov said, right? I'm not sure what I'm not sure what the criteria is. Again, the Rishonim weren't so clear because it didn't seem like, because to them, either way, it was dangerous, right? Either way, you could end up with a Chodesh Ein B'Sakana, which you could turn into a Chodesh Yesh B'Sakana. To the Rishonim, this doesn't seem to be as important, but for us, I think this is an important question, right? If we know that you're just in discomfort, but you're not actually in danger of getting ill. Okay, you're in great discomfort, but you're not in danger of getting ill. How does that work? I'm not so sure. It's not so clear to me, but I think it's a good question. Generally speaking, the poskim tend to say, once the Rishonim said that Hakol Cholim Mitzel Tzina, that getting cold is a form of sickness, so unto itself it's a form of sickness, regardless of, right? I know Kiva said before, obviously, and different people work differently, but you see, I have that problem because I always feel hot, and then through the winter I always get hoarse because I don't warm myself, because I always feel hot, and then I do get sick. So, right? On the other hand, obviously, there is a subjective element also to sickness, not only to other people who are more susceptible to illness that has to do with cold. So I don't know.
Many husband-wife conferences.
Yes.
Consultations are about
Yes.
what temperature should be the house should be at, or the apartment should be at, because men and women experience
Right.
temperatures differently.
Sure. Yeah, we had that discussion. We're going to have it in a moment again in the context of air conditioning. So that's when it comes to heat, and heat is in the context of actual illness, right? Not discomfort. Now, I'll just point out, we're going to go on to air conditioning now. The Minchad Yitzchak says that turning air conditioning on is only drabanan. It's not deraisa. Presumably also turn the heat on with an air conditioner unit, right? With the hot air unit. The chora is also only drabanan, not deraisa.
You mean because it's electricity?
Yes.
Electric running? Well,
Yes.
all right,
I mean, if we're talking about a heating element, if you have a heating element, if you have
electricity, you're turning on the switch, and you're supposed to making a fire.
right. Although again, if you have a hot, if your heat is based on the hot water running through, right? If you have a hot water radiator,
The Junkers.
right? A Junker's hot water radiator. So there you won't be cooking on Shabbos, so that's also the raisa, right? You're cooking the water, right? So that would also be not you, the goy, but still, right? You can only request that if there's actual the same level of cold. But if we're talking about air conditioner units that are drabanan, used for heat, so the chorah here would be easier to make out, even if we're not so sure that it's actually equivalent to illness, right? The assumption here was in the Mordechai Shulchan Aruch, we're talking about a fire, and that's mamash havarav, that's mamash deraisa, right? So what do you say about air conditioning? Air conditioning, in a normal scenario, we're not talking about the danger of illness, but it could be great discomfort, right?
We're talking about heat or cold?
We're talking about cold. Then we moved on to
Your heat turning on heat.
turning on. No, that it's hot out.
Oh, it's hot and you want.
yeah. You want to turn on the air conditioning to cool it down. I'll just say
Which is moving from a pre-electric world, where everything is done by fire, to an electric world. So we have to keep in mind that there's this big difference now.
right. Yeah, for sure. And that's where the Minchad Yitzchak starts. He says, well, we're talking about drabanan, that's air conditioning, so that should already allow more leniency. And he says, if you're in Sar, so clearly you can. Right? I'll read the paragraph, the bottom one of page 11, by me at least. אמנם נרד בנידון בידן לפי המבואר בדברי המגן אברהם, היחדה ורק שבות יש להטיל משום צער, ובנידון בידן נרדף כוח התנזר דבר עבירה כלל, נראה דבר עבירה כיסוד רבנן, אם כן באמירה לגוי בשבות לשבות. במקום צער גדול כחום היום מאוד, יש רק לפתוח המעבר על ידי גוי. Now, what is חום היום מאוד? Okay, so we're back to the subjective question, right? Some people would say that it has to be 30 degrees out to be considered too hot, and if you ask me, it's 25, right? It depends on, so that l'chor would be a subjective thing. But once again, according to the Minchal Yitzchak, again, it says Chom Hayom Me'od, sounds like maybe 25. He'd say to me, you can still cope. It has to be actually hot, right?
Well, why is this subjective?
Why is it subjective?
Objective.
I understand the question.
Why can it be that for a person like, for you, if 25 is really causes you tzad?
Oh, for sure. No, I don't think he'd say.
Oh.
No, I think you're right. It will remain subjective. The thing is
he
this:
won't.
it has to be chomeyom gadol, chomeyom meod.
No, it's just
But
a
for you
unit
it's
whereby everyone would agree it's hot.
Is that the definition? I'm not sure, because I think that if
But
we're making,
there's an area where it's objective. There's no
you think there's an objective measure that
no
gives you
doubt
freedom?
about it. Yeah.
So I'm not sure about that because it could very
No,
well.
but he said tzad gadol.
I just want to explain what I
no,
said. I meant differently. I meant that when it's 26 degrees out, I'm happy to turn the air conditioning on.
Right. So I'm saying. for
But I'm happy to turn the air conditioning on. I can cope with that.
Yeah, but everyone
When
agrees
it's 28, I'm
29.
suffering.
Oh.
My wife can.
you. So that's
Cope up
it.
to
If
30,
you're
whatever,
really
right?
suffering, literally
So
suffering.
right. So now that remains subjective. It's just saying it's not the minute that you feel slightly hot. Now, it's hot. So, now I did always wonder about whether humidity would make a difference in that, right? Because you're suffering more. Now, where is one of the most humid cities in the world?
All day.
Okay, true, but I was going to say New York. Now, why is that important? Because that's where Rav Moshe lived, and Rav Moshe said that you can't use the air conditioning, that it doesn't justify.
But before you get there,
Just say it. Yes.
to add another level of complexity,
Okay.
everybody who's writing now is already writing in a world where they're regularly use air conditioning. And I say that because I once interviewed a 90-plus-year-old person who said, oh, I remember air conditioning for us was we'd open the window and we'd hang out the window. So it's important to realize that in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and maybe even into the 50s, where air conditioning wasn't so common, this question wouldn't have risen in the same way. It's only because air conditioning became common
Mm-hmm.
that we now then work with an expectation that we'll be cooled off inside.
So
how
the
does
same
that
thing with the fan
it's-
though.
How does that
There's
expectation play into
tremendous-
things?
Tremendous amount of subjectivity
Mhm.
and also tremendous amount of change because of social circumstance and technology development.
And where do you think that leads?
think
Do I have to go by the
Tzad.
20s? Do I have to go by the 20s standard?
No, you go by where you are.
Saying our idea of tsar partly has to do with what our expectations are. If we're trained now to be seen about also in this direction, then we lower the standard for what's.
Right. So you're saying we can't. This Rav Moshe is important to know that he said this, but on the other hand, we can't. It'll be an anachronism to try to use this Rav Moshe nowadays, because to him, air conditioning was
Not so common.
some kind of luxury.
Right.
But to us, there's no home that doesn't have air conditioning, basically, right? I don't know, but I'm saying it's so common that it would be considered strange to not use the air conditioning on a hot day, and therefore we would consider it tsar, and it's as I agree that it would be a subjective thing.
So it's technological change and personal
Sure.
subjectivity.
Right, so the technological change leads to a different definition of our istenisut, right? As Yaakov said, right? As our expectation of being comfortable, feeling comfortable also on a hot day is different than it was 50 years ago, right? I don't have to go 100 years ago, 100 years back, 50 years ago, right? The fact that Rav Moshe says no doesn't necessarily mean that answer is applicable to any specific person today. Right, anyone who lives with air conditioning, the level of expectation is different. Therefore, the tsar limits are different. Since the definition is tsar, I agree that it would be much easier to make with that nowadays. I'll jump on to the last example here because it's a very interesting one. The Tzitz Eliezer was asked by a person who was. The person who's in the hospital and he wants to learn Torah. right? Wants to learn. Let's have a look at the Tzitzi Eliezer. It's an interesting point. Bottom page 12, in my pages at least. The Beit HaCholim Shari Tzedek. Anyone from Shari Tzedek here? הנהוג שבליל שבת בשעה ידועה עובר גוי בכל המחלקות ומכבה את החשמל וקורא שחולה שאין לו סכנה איננו יכול להירדם ורוצה ללמוד. אם מותר לבקש את הגוי שיחזור וידליק עבורו את החשמל שעל יד מצווה כדי שיוכל ללמוד. So what they do on Friday night, you can tell me if it's true on the Shari Tzedek people. On Friday night, they know that many of the patients can't turn their own light off, so a guy goes around and turns them all off. Then the person finds himself late at night, he doesn't have his family around, he's all on his own, and he wants to learn. What's he going to do? He's bored, he's on his own, there's nothing for him to do. He wants to learn. Can he ask the guy to turn the light back on? Now,
It's always some light.
why?
So they'll never make a more shot.
You're saying there's always some light, and therefore we can base on the leniency we saw in shiur number 3, that adding light, right? Added. Okay, that's a good point. I wasn't.
But maybe it
I
wasn't
don't know
like
the
that.
hospital as well as you do.
It's
So
also the Tzot Mitzvah, no? Isn't it?
okay, so let's see his
Yeah,
answer. It's an
yeah.
interesting answer. Right. So you're saying first of all, maybe it's only adding light. It's a good point. I don't know if he addresses that. Second point, it's the tzorach mitzvah. Now you can say it's the tzorach choleh sheish bo. Is it the tzorach choleh? Well, he is sick, but that's not exactly the classic understanding of tzorach choleh, what tzorach choleh means, right? Tzorach choleh usually means.
If I was Friday night in my house, I wanted to learn Torah, and I had the less light. I can't turn the light on just so I can learn Torah. I mean, what's the difference here, really? It's
Right. The fact that he's sick is that.
Yes, because
Yes. Why?
when your spiritual care in hospitals focuses a lot on what's the role of people's emotions in the healing or the illness framework.
Okay, so I think
People's
Tzitzi Eliezer
emotions
actually.
play a big role in helping them to get better.
So I think Tzitzi Eliezer actually addresses that to a certain extent. Let's have a look. לפי עניות דעתי יש להתיר לחולה שבנידוננו לומר לגוי להדליק עבורו החשמל על ידי עד מיטתו כדי שיוכל ללמוד, בהיות שזה דבר מצווה וגם במקום חולי קצת. ניתן לומר שזה עוד יותר במקום חולי קצת, כי באי השינה והשכיבה לבטלה יוכל לבוא לידי רפרוף עצביו והרעה במצבו. Now, so the rest, I'm going to, so the rest I think he addressed a bit more, but I think these are the important points you asked. Does this have anything to do with his illness? Now, our inclination is to say, well, not really, right? Because he's sick, but he wants to learn Torah. Like, that's good. It's good to want to learn Torah, but it's not he wants to learn Torah because he's sick, right? He wants to learn Torah because he's a good yid, right? He happens to be sick.
Magen Matzeh,
Isn't it?
kids argue.
Sorry?
Magen Matzeh.
Right. So the Tzitzi Eliezer goes even more simple than that. as
Maybe it
were,
should be
right?
excluded
More-
because of refuah.
It's right.
Shabbos. No.
Yeah. He says the Tzitzi Eliezer goes even more simple than that, less more nigla than that, I'd say, right? And says just lying there and being bored and feeling lonely is not healthy. That could be detrimental to the healing process. It's much healthier to feel like I'm doing something productive. I'm learning Torah. I'm getting something done, right? It's much healthier, and therefore, since it's also healthier, it's physically healthier. Mimela, you can also request it. Now, would he say the same if a person wants to
Read the newspaper.
So let's not talk about newspapers. Let's talk
Have a
about
cup of
reading
tea.
a scientific article. Let's talk about something else that's truly productive, right? I'm saying, in a newspaper you can argue maybe it's not productive, is it just whatever. But reading a scientific article, right? Or just for example, right? Would we say the same? Well, he wouldn't be able to add the tzorach mitzvah. The question is, does he really require all of these? Well, he is sick. It is a tzorach mitzvah, and this is helpful to the illness. What about being helpful to the illness without the tzorach mitzvah? I'm not so sure. But what light are we talking about? The chorov is talking about proper illness, or we're talking about
So it's just the light
a
by itself.
deraisa light, right? a light that's what do you call it? Chut lahat.
Incandescent.
Yeah.
Right,
As
now
opposed to-
it's an LED. It
Now
may
that everything's LED, it could be that you could make more easily, right? Because just the tsar of having to lie there alone and be lonely when you'd rather read a scientific article. Or do something else
take the other
productive.
position that the best thing is to leave it dark, so that this person is kind of pushed to go back to sleep, because sleep
Okay.
is actually healing.
So you're saying right. So here we have the two-step tshuva. First, the rabbis to say you should do something that's productive. You should do what's best for the patient, and that will justify doing the drabanan, turning the LED light on. Now, what's best for the patient? Well, ask the doctor. The doctor says it's best for the patient to have to be in darkness and to fall asleep, or is it better for him to not feel like he's lying there in the dark, not knowing what to do with himself, and he'd rather it'd be better to feel like he's doing productive and fall asleep as he reads. So it's a good question, but I think it was just an interesting point that Tzitz Eliezer. These are just a few examples of tsar, of choli, and there are a couple more. Rafi.